Hello, and thanks for joining us today. I'm really excited you could be here. Look, in order to run a successful business, it takes a lot of data. As a matter of fact, the bigger your business becomes, the more data points you really need to effectively run the business, especially if you really want to make good profits that you can reinvest to help the business grow, as well as actually put more money in your pocket. But that's the problem. Data, there's so much data that you need. It's so overwhelming that you really could use a simple way to be able to get that data where it's more useful to you. And that's exactly where artificial intelligence comes in. So with us today is Brian Weaver. Now, Brian's going to dive into the exact topic of how AI can actually make that data easier for you to be able to use. Now, Brian serves as CEO of Torch AI and has more than 20 years of experience leading mission-driven, high-growth, technology-focused companies. Now, Torch AI helps leading organizations leverage artificial intelligence in a unique way via a proprietary enterprise data management software solution. Now, today, Torch AI supports clients like H&R Block with fraud detection and mitigation, and the U.S. Department of Defense with machine learning-enabled background investigations for all federal employees, supporting the determination of an individual's trustworthiness and security credentialing. Now, prior to Torch AI, Brian launched or acquired several companies, all focused on technology-enabled services and data connectivity. His companies serve nearly 1,300 clients and have been recognized as a Small Business of the Year by the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce. Brian, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thank you, Ty. Great to be here.
So I love the problem you solve, but tell me a little bit more about it. When you look at this, what made you kind of get into the industry of using AI to make data easier to use?
Yeah, it was actually accidental. I'm one of these hard to kill entrepreneurial, ambitious people, and so I've had a fun career. But there's kind of two things that happen. One, there's this explosion of data. It's not just a competitive advantage anymore. It's harder just to get your day job done. There's 2.4 Internet of Things, like digital devices per human on the planet today, right? So there's just this explosion of information, and it's getting worse. It's growing phenomenally. The average enterprise is only using 2% of the available data to them, right? And then kind of the third little stat, which makes this puzzle very, very difficult, is that 90% of that data is messy data that basically requires people to use. So things like PDFs or scans of faxes, audio files, all these things that basically these little technology apps come along, but they require people to kind of plug these holes in technology. So what you have is this explosion of data. The fact that an organization can't use 98% of it, they throw it away. And then what they do have requires too many people. And so the machines are creating a problem and humans are being asked to solve it. And it's just, it's this asymmetric disadvantage. And so, it's kind of funny, like most people are like, oh, this AI is a massive competitive advantage in a marketplace. And what we found in most of our clients, sort of start in this space, it's becoming harder to just get the job done. The job that the employees had last year is now harder because the data is just more complex and there's more of it. And so the whole idea for Torch came out of a complete failure. I had sold the software in the early days. Microsoft was my second customer. GE, believe it or not, was my first customer. Microsoft was my second customer. And in servicing Microsoft, which was a great client, but it was very hard. We went quarter to quarter. And when you're dealing with data and you're trying to provide, some sort of analytic insight into a business how it's performing or some big market opportunity to go take advantage of, the problem was you're only as good as the data that you've got. And what I had was a business that, fundamentally we were, signing 7-figure contracts, but they weren't profitable at all because I had so many people kind of behind the curtain engineering data constantly, and it was always flawed. And when I looked around, there was nobody that was focused on trying to solve the fundamental problem of just making data easier to use by a machine primarily, right? To solve that problem. Nobody was doing that. Everybody was focused on pretty pictures analytics and talking about what could be. And even in the AI space, people are really focused on building models that do fancy things, but no one was focused on the first mile of a workflow, which was how do I just get information into a format that makes it easier for people and easier for machines to use. And it was out of a complete failure. I was running out of money. I mean, I funded Torch with my kids' money, my kids' college savings. I kind of went all in at the poker table and put all the chips in on this idea. Because once you see something like this, you can't unsee it. And you're like, this is going to solve a big problem for the world. And we all believe it in our bellies, and it's a really fun place to work because of that. But basically, when I saw that and realized that no one was focused on this piece of it, really this data infrastructure was non-existent, and people were being asked to do, kind of terrible things, mundane things. We decided to found Torch in 2017, and we built a software platform called Nexus that just instantly reads data. Doesn't matter what it is, the system doesn't need to know what it is in advance, and it instantly turns it into something that a machine can then read and do something with. And so it fundamentally changes how businesses create operational capabilities and insights. So it's been fun. That's the long, really tall building elevator story.
So give me an example of like how it works. So how is what you designed take all this massive amount of data and then break it down, I think you said, into a way that then a machine can easily process that data?
Yeah, so we're a business that focuses on building more generalized AI. And again, we're focused on data infrastructure. And so when you start thinking about that, what we do is we build an artificial intelligence that can be applied across multiple domains, multiple modes of data. And so what we're doing is we're mimicking the way the human brain interacts with information, right? You can see a digital. I'm gonna tell a snowy owl story, which is a kind of an inside joke with our CTO John Kramer, who's a genius and helped invent the way we do this. But your brain can assimilate what a digital version of a bird looks like, real version of the bird, and even the silhouette. And your brain can do that very, very quickly, right? You have a limited amount of data that comes in, and you're sort of pre-processing the data. You're not thinking, you're pre-processing this data. And what we decided was, and tried and then filed a patent on, what we said was, what if we could just convert any data object to a string of alphanumeric characters, ASCII text, if you want to get super nerdy. And we have other formats that we can use. And that text just basically described everything in the file. And we do that without landing the data. The data is in motion, which is the key aspect, right? Once you've stored the data, then you're sort of, now you have a mountain of data to climb through. But once I convert that data to an output that a machine can do something with, then we actually can start applying machine learning models to go extract data, to go test it, pull it apart, convert it in interesting ways, do analytics, all before the data actually comes to rest or lands in some sort of cloud environment or data store. And that one little move it really mimics the way the human brain receives information and pre-processes it before you go and take action against it. And we basically built this product called Nexus. And what it does is dynamically extracts all of the known information about the object without any preconception of what the object is. So you can throw a video file at it, an audio file at it, PDFs, scans. We do a lot of like image related things. A lot of, believe it or not, documents in an average enterprise are a big pain, right? PDFs and faxes, even scans of mail. I mean, all these kind of things are out there, invoices. And so you start thinking about enterprise data, and it's not, just tabular data like in Excel spreadsheets or in Salesforce. It's this messy data that needs to make it into one of these business systems. And this is the issue with enterprises not being able to use 98% of the data. So what we do is we instantly sort of structure the data, and we set it up where we can run a bunch of machine learning models against it, whether the customer has their own machine learning models that we have big clients, like you mentioned, H&R Block. they have some pretty advanced analytics that the teams internally there have built. But we also have clients, that use pre-trained models that we provide as well. But we're really, again, focused more under the hood. We don't compete with these analytic companies. We compete with the people that are doing a lot of big data infrastructure systems. So it's been fun. It's neat. But you can take an audio WAV file and convert it the same way you can convert a PDF. And that's the key. The customer has mixed modes of data, and they really need to see sort of context between them. And in order to do that without people, because once you have people in it, the problem, you can't solve it. It doesn't scale well.
So give me an example of how that process actually works. I mean, we've described the process, but give me an example of a real use case scenario.
Yeah, that's great. We actually, we just started a program with one of the largest mechanical engineering and building design firms in the country. The firm's called Henderson. They actually designed SoFi Stadium. So they're, one of the most well-known, well-regarded firms in the country, if not the world. And one of their biggest challenges is they've got people opening up drawings. And these will be, potentially up to 200 pages in size, but, anywhere from 40 to 160, 200 page documents. And these are all created out of different systems, right? Because you've got an architect providing one version, they're working on some stuff. And so there's just this messy bucket of information. And you can imagine everybody's probably seen an architectural drawing, if not a mechanical, set of documents for mechanical engineering. But what they had trouble doing was every time they had to go and touch one of these things, it just cost the company, hours and hours and hours of time just to go look for the information because it's non-standard. So it took a human being sifting through this information to go find, in one example, an electrical diagram, a wiring diagram for something, right? And so a wiring diagram is a non-standard thing. So how in the world is a person supposed to figure that out? So, and oh, by the way, they've got tens of millions of these documents that they've got to sift through. So it's a major, major issue. And they've got thousands of employees. And so for us, what we were able to do is to take mechanical engineering drawings and have the machine learn to read it. And the way the machine, the machine learned, the way we have our machine learning set up, the machine teaches itself. So the machine will come in and start saying, okay, I see that, and I'm going to learn how to look for that. And I'm going to learn how not to look for that and how to eliminate some things. And at the end, after just a couple of days and a relatively small sample size of information, the system is running almost 99% accurate, identifying these electrical diagrams in these very complex documents. And we predict that it'll save each one of these engineers about 6 to 8 hours a day, just pulling this information out. So it's, but what's the real value proposition of that, right? Okay, the machine is able to beat the human at accuracy. The machine does it in a matter of seconds, where the human might take a full day or maybe even longer. The key thing is human beings are smart and they're creative, and most of the jobs that our customers have, they're not getting the full advantage of having a person in the job, because that person can solve problems. They're a genius, but they spend most of their time doing these mundane tasks. It's almost this degradation against society, the way all of us are now just suffering, having to sift through all this information. And we're not using our brains for what what we were put on this planet to do. And so the coolest thing about our job is when we see the employees of our clients, they light up because they're using their brains again. They're creative thinkers. They can solve problems. And that human ingenuity is something that a machine can't really compete with. And so we're trying to put more time back in their day so that they can spend more time, exercising their God-given talent, for sure.
So it sounds like the machine learning is pretty much the most important aspect. Like you've got AI that maybe comes and takes the data and breaks it down to a point where the machine can then use it. And then the machine learning and its ability to adapt is what really takes that information and makes it useful to the human,
Yeah, in machine learning in our space, I mean, there's a lot of vaporware. There's a lot of people that just say they're doing AI or whatever. But some of the fundamental questions is, how does the machine actually learn? How does it adapt and evolve to an environment? And these are these things where this market that we're in is growing very, very quickly, and even companies that are building capabilities. Statistical regression is not artificial intelligence, right? The whole notion is the system has to teach itself. The system has to learn and has to learn to adapt. But that is the aspect, because guess what? Your environment's changing, right? There's all these things outside of your company. There's things inside of your company that are in constant change. And a machine, the whole point of machine learning is it's adaptable and it's inexpensive. So I can throw a machine learning model and it'll actually start predicting things that are about to happen and start learning how to measure those things, and anticipate some of these needs, not just react to what the human might see, but the machine, because of its ability to sort of calculate math at grand scale and especially in a very complex way, the machine can start identifying hotspots for a company, that's kind of the fun part, right? But before that, in order to identify that, you just have to have the data available to the machine so that the analytics can happen, But yeah, I mean, this is a machine. A machine created this problem, right? Humans didn't create the problem. Machines and the availability of machines to process the data creates the problem. I mean, this is why there's a deluge of data. And an increasing complexity of data. So it's absurd to think that humankind should try and solve the problem, even with tools. There's a bunch of software companies that create tools like labeling tools and data governance tools and all these other things. And I mean, it's like rocks. The original tools. Using rocks to go and try and build a civilization. I mean, you need heavy equipment, and this is kind of the time that we're in now. So I see that as a almost existential problem for humans, really, when you think about it. I mean, your social media feed will tell you this is a major problem. Machines are creating most of that content. That's one example that's sort of material and relevant to most people.
What are some of the general uses that you see of this as it looks into the future? So, I mean, for example, like I can see that machine learning in this system can come in and take my customers' payment data and actually help us predict based on somebody's behaviors, maybe when they may stop paying, right? And then we can reach out to them proactively to do what needs to be done to make sure they do continue to pay. I'm just making stuff up off the top of my head, but that's an example potentially of how this could work for small, medium, or even enterprise type businesses. What are some other ways that you really see this into the future helping businesses?
Yeah, I mean, so we're a business that makes data more available and valuable inside the enterprise. I mean, again, you go back to just that simple stat. Organizations are only putting 2% of their data to use, and so we make data more available. And so when you do that, what's interesting with our customers is there's kind of two primary use cases. One is new business development. I can use all of this newly available information to better understand my sales motion, opportunities to attract new customers. And then the second is customer retention or reducing churn. A lot of times companies don't even understand why customers are churning. And especially when you talk about really, really large consumer-oriented businesses, understanding customer churn is like a major thing. But because they don't have this data available, they would only have, like in our world, we call it tabular data, like when did they make their last payment? How much was the payment? When did they start? That's all easy stuff, right? The harder stuff is how do I create context and correlation across multiple disparate data sets? And the only way you can do that is by making that data more available, structuring it in a way that you can query it, and doing that without people. And so again, in the enterprise, we see that as two of the big use cases. Often when customers come to us, they have an operational capability, like they're just overwhelmed. We have a big, one of the largest insurance brokerages in the world is one of our clients. They just have a problem getting policies out the door. It takes them 3 to 4 weeks. And with our system, it's less than an hour. And so, we're sort of pioneering a new workflow for them. And when you think about, that industry, that's an industry that basically helps to extend trust across entire economies. And if we can make that system work faster and better and create more competitiveness, that's just good, good for business. And on the government side, where we spend a lot of our time, really we're protecting the people that are protecting us in the United States primarily. And that's really, there's two things. One, how can I use more information, more quality information to protect the lives of warfighters? And two, can I do that at less cost to the taxpayer? I mean, there's a major issue in government today where these old school system integrator companies are just soaking the American taxpayer and providing, frankly, very little value. And so we've seen that. And granted, we're new to that market. We've only been selling into government since 2018. But it's kind of eye-opening when you get in there and you see some of the waste and abuse that's happening. And we're an answer to that. We're commercial off the shelf, ready to go. We cover, most use cases with the system with some minor modifications to the platform, which are pretty easy and low cost. We can handle some major issues with data infrastructure that kind of create a lot of the complexity, the spaghetti bowl IT projects that seem to be popular in these government environments. So anyway, I think primarily, that's what I see for a business like ours. I do see a bit of a commoditization in more of the analytics space. The race to create, risk models and some of these kind of off the shelf models, I think is a bit misplaced. There's certainly public firms that have gone public in recent months and years that were sort of first to market, but the customers typically don't want a pre-canned risk model, for example. They've got their own construct, and they want to have more of a voice into understanding what a machine's doing with their information. But that, those are, everyone wants sales, right? Help me sell more, help me keep more, help me protect, help me make it more efficient. Those are pretty standard.
And you just talked about that with data infrastructure. I think that's where kind of the data is initially accumulated, where I think that's where data is processed, stored, transferred, even kept secure. So if that's the data infrastructure, what are you guys doing to help make sure that data is kept safe?
Yeah, so the first thing is we don't move it. One of the biggest problems with data security is you end up with PII spill. So PII is personally identifiable information. It's a big issue. And often what happens when you hear about these data breaches and everything else, the data is, your data is all over an enterprise. And sometimes not even, you think it's inside the enterprise that you've granted permission, but often it ends up leaving and ends up getting locked up in some other, software company's database. And that just increases the surface area for attack, right? This is a major issue. This is not going to stop. Cybersecurity is a major problem. The sort of global nature of these threats and what these adversaries are doing to us from a cyber perspective. I mean, it's not going to abate. So what companies need to understand is, one, if I'm offshoring my data, often that data is going into countries that don't care about data privacy, and we see that as a major issue. A lot of our big customers have realized that this human problem they solve with finding cheap labor offshore, and I see a big correction in that market coming. And then really number two, a lot of the tech companies that we compete with, for example, they want to go and replicate your data. They want you to copy it, store it somewhere else. And what that does, it just creates, two areas of information that I now have to protect. And then there's linkage in between. So I've just almost tripled my surface area for a potential attack or a breach. And it's a major issue. Our answer to that is don't move the data. Like, don't move it. Leave it where it's at. Make sure that that's secure. We're big believers in the zero trust concept, right? But try and avoid, under penalty of death, try and avoid replicating and mutating data, because it's terrible. And then if what we do is we use a machine to read the data where it is. And it doesn't actually, it reduces the risk, because we're able to understand the data where it's at. And we can actually even monitor the data at the object level to make sure that the data is not transforming or being added to or being removed or adjusted while it's sitting there, which is one of the big issues, right? So we can kind of monitor the entire ecosystem for change, and that gives us an early warning that there's potentially something adverse happening with that data from a security perspective. And finally, all of the connective tissue that we have between all of these data sets is the most secure on the planet. And so, that whole strategy, I think, is a much better approach when it comes to security. But it is a major issue, Ty, and you're smart to bring it up. Customers typically don't think about that. They buy software because they like the bells and whistles, but they don't think about the security implications. And often when you're replicating the data, that's, problem number one. It's hard to put a lid back on it.
Brian, I'm curious, where do you see the future of your industry going?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, there's been a lot of advancement in the space. I do think that the notion of automation is a smart one. What I struggle to see, what I observe, like, think of metaverse as a kind of a topical thing that your audience might find interesting. The metaverse is kind of this walled garden idea, right? The question I always have is, if 90% of enterprise data is unstructured, hard to read, takes people to figure out, and I'm imagining that the future state is an environment like the metaverse where I could kind of live and work and conduct business and, whatever. I'm going to have a hard time getting information into that environment in a way that's usable and shareable. And so this is where I think when you start imagining 10 or 20 years from now, the likelihood, like, I've got high school age kids, and they live in these virtual environments all the time. They spend half their day, connecting virtually, and some of that's an outcome of COVID and being sort of trained for a couple of years to live in that type of environment. So I think, we don't do that necessarily at our age group, but the young people today are much more comfortable doing that. The million-dollar question is, how will that data get in there to be used, right? It ends up being just a subset of the available information. And then two, you've got this big issue where machines are creating content and machines are optimizing content to stimulate reactions across these social networks, right? And so that has this weird knock-on effect where the machines are creating more and more of the content. So you already see it, right? The DALL-E 2 is creating images, and it keeps going, and you've got all kinds of synthetic video and synthetic photos that are being created. You got synthetic text, and so you've got all of this really interesting content that's being created. You got social media platforms that are increasingly run by bots, and they're creating clickbait style headlines that create this almost psychological response, this an anxiety riddled response from people to get more clicks and to sell more ads. And so you just see that there's going to be more and more of that. I mean, you're not going to get away from that. So I think the more a machine can help you understand source, right? The validity, accuracy, absolute truth of content, understanding the source of that content, understanding how that content might be changing. That is absolutely a critical thing that we need to do as a society. We hope to play a small part in that for sure, because we believe in that. Data attribution and data lineage is a key thing. Where did the data come from? Who did what to it? Prove that the machine learning model was open and transparent and not some black boxy thing. That's what I worry about, and that's what I see. I see on the negative side, I see a huge growth in that, and then a response in kind. And on the enterprise side, you can read any business outlet. There's a massive investment in machines trying to help companies make better decisions. And that's bumpy a little bit because we're in this really weird transitory phase where you're going from like old legacy style IT architectures to much more data fabric and highly connected, more decentralized kind of environments. And so right now is kind of a really interesting time. Wild West a little bit, but a big transition to the future. And so I think you got to kind of wrap your brain around all of that, because your personal life and your business life are now blended in a way that's unimaginable. So I think that's the next 10 years will be pretty fascinating for sure.
Brian, really interesting stuff today. A lot of stuff, and it's a big look into what's happening in the future as well. Love what you guys are doing. Where can everybody go that's watching and listening to this to be able to learn more?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me on. I'm on LinkedIn, and I really enjoy. I'm like I said, a serial entrepreneur. I've made a ton of mistakes, and I've learned a lot of lessons, and I've had some success. And I like to help other people, and so I'm available on LinkedIn and enjoy interacting with people there.
Awesome. Thanks again, Brian. I appreciate having you today.
Thank you, Ty.
All right. So listen, if you're watching and listening to this is a peek into the future. And I found that if you really want to build a very successful business, the more you could be on the forefront of what's developing, the better off you're going to be. And as Brian said, we got a real problem right now. There's so much information and data that being able to break it down where it's actually useful to you is a big issue. And he gave just one example of, an insurance company that's taken, 4 days to do something that now can be done within an hour or hours at the max. I mean, imagine what that kind of efficiency does for your organization. And when you're the one that's getting it done in an hour and the other people, your competitors, are getting done in 4 days, imagine the competitive advantage that it gives you. And talk about AI. We talk about using data for this purpose. We talk about machine learning. These are the advantages that actually provide you, but we just scratched the surface. So if you go to torch.ai, you're able to get a lot of information about everything we talked about today, a deeper dive. You're also able to get more information about what they do and see if this is a good fit for you, especially as an enterprise-sized business. So make sure you check out torch.ai. I'm also going to put a link to Brian's LinkedIn page on the show resources page as well. So thank you very much for tuning in. Make sure you check out torch.ai.